Remember when Aaron Rodgers went down?
Yes.
And we all viewed the Jets season as very different than the way we envisioned it. One of the ideas that many of us had was you got to go trade for a veteran quarterback. But that's not realistic. That doesn't happen in the NFL for the most part. This morning, something happened that could lead to that destination for the New York Jets. And for me, it's a dream, and the dream is alive. Justin Jefferson went on IR. He's going to miss at least 4 games. The Minnesota Vikings are 1-4. Sure, they play the Bears next week. After that, they play the Niners. They play the Packers. They're dead. They know they're dead. We all know they're dead. Minnesota knows they're dead. And if they're dead without the best wide receiver on the planet for the next 4 weeks, the Minnesota Vikings are going to have to make a very difficult decision. Players don't tank. Organizations tank. Kirk Cousins is a free agent at the end of this season. They are not going to re-sign him. The market is now right. The land has now been given seedlings for the Vikings to trade Kirk Cousins. And while some Jet fans out there may have fallen in love with Zach Wilson over the last 2 weeks because of 5 good drives, I'm still a realistic Jet fan. I still view Zach Wilson as a nice young kid that certainly is maturing, that has shown some little bitty itsy-bitsy progress over the last 2 weeks, but is a guy that's not very good. And Kirk Cousins is. And that would be the ultimate Band-Aid move. So 3 weeks ago, it was a fantasy. It's fantasy football. It's never going to happen. Well, today on October 10th, it is damn realistic that the Vikings would trade Kirk Cousins. And if they do, Tiki, I am abusing my cell phone by calling Minnesota day in and day out to acquire him.
Here's the only problem with your suggestion. Number one. Actually, there's multiple problems.
Go ahead.
But I'll start with the
I
most
have an answer
glaring
to
one.
every one of your issues.
Number
Go ahead.
one, Kirk Cousins has a no-trade clause.
Okay, I want to ask you a question.
All right.
Do you want me to break them apart each time, or do you want to throw them all at me and then I'll break them apart?
I'll throw them all out.
I'm going to write them down as you say.
Number one,
no trade.
Kirk Cousins has a no-trade clause.
No trade clause.
I'm assuming that he does not want to go to a team that is historically not been great.
Okay.
And that's not a knock on the Jets. It's just a reality.
Okay.
And if he's going to get traded, it's going to be someplace that likely is going to win a championship in the very near future. Now, that could happen if he comes here, but he's not. I don't know if he's that kind of lifter. So I'm going to say number one. Number two, if he is going to waive his no-trade clause, he's also going to want a contract. And if Kirk Cousins comes to the New York Jets, is there any way the Jets are going to agree to give him any kind of contract? Okay. And the answer is no, because Zach Wilson's here. I'm assuming you would trade Zach Wilson or get rid of him somehow. But Zach Wilson's here. But more importantly, Aaron Rodgers is likely to come back at some point, maybe this year or even next year. So how are you giving Kirk Cousins a contract if Aaron Rodgers is going to be here? And by the way, Aaron Rodgers is still under contract. Number three, and this is probably the biggest one for Kurt, is that if he comes into this system next week, how soon until he can figure it out to the point where he's, I don't know, on a high level and playing like the Kirk Cousins who throws for 4,000 yards every season? Hey, there's just a lot of obstacles to make this happen. 3 weeks ago, before we even thought that Zach was anywhere close to being fixed, I would have said, yeah, maybe that's a possibility. But I think the biggest one, and I didn't even mention this one, this is actually the biggest one. I think they're okay with Zach Wilson.
Okay with Zach Wilson.
I think he's getting better, especially when you have the 4.39 running Breece Hall as your starting running back. I'm serious. He was a game breaker. Yeah. Like, he's your difference maker right there. You don't need to go get Kirk Cousins to be your savior.
You don't need Kirk Cousins, okay?
There you go.
Is that it?
That is it.
That's it?
I'm sure I'll think of another one.
Oh, this is going to be easy. All right, let's go one by one.
Yes.
No trade clause.
Yes.
Listen, it's very simple. The Minnesota Vikings are going to give up on this season. The Minnesota Vikings are going to look at the injury to Justin Jefferson, the fact that Brian Flores has not really fixed their defense. It's slightly better. It's still not very good. And they're going to make an organizational decision that I'm sure most Viking fans would be on board with. I'd ask Giannotti, he is a Viking fan, and say, you know what? It's not happening this year. So let's move on. The best way to move on is to take your quarterback who's good and send them away. The way you get him to waive his no trade is you tell him that. If you tell Kirk Cousins, look, we appreciate what you've done the last few years. We're not re-signing you at the end of this season. We're not really trying to season, but we're going to do you a favor. We're going to send you somewhere where you have a chance to win. I think that's an easy open and shut. He calls his wife. His wife says, I don't know, New York's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Kirk says, well, we can live in New Jersey. That's less scary. And all of a sudden, the cousin family's good with it. They're going to the Palisades Mall on the weekend to see the Paw Patrol movie. They're checking out Busy Bees, and everybody's happy. You convince Kirk Cousins to come here because he has a chance to win, and the Vikings are giving up. So that's number one. That one's done. Number two, you said the contract.
The contract's a big deal.
Okay.
Kirk Cousins is not old. He's not 39 years old.
He's 35. He's not exactly a spring chicken.
Okay, but 35 is 4 good years left.
Here's what I say, and I assume that the Vikings at this point would say, I'm going to give you permission to speak to Joe Douglas now because we've agreed on the compensation, which we'll get to. And I say to him, look, Kirk, here's the deal. You're right. You're not our long-term answer here. I'm not going to lie to you. Aaron Rodgers is our long-term answer. But in the short term, we could have a hell of a one-night stand. A hell of a one-night stand. You got a chance to win.
I would use different terminology since he is very religious.
All right.
Very upstanding as a man.
Can you then come up with something then?
I will think of it.
I'm a dirty, dirty man, so I come up with one-night stands. I apologize. But I would basically sell him, look, I'm not going to lie to you. No, there's not going to be a long-term contract, but you have a chance to win here. The Minnesota Vikings are 1-5, and they're going nowhere. 1-4 and going nowhere. And so you just convince him, very similarly to the no-trade clause, you have a chance here. The third thing you brought up is the time in the system.
Yes.
Listen, the Jets right now won a game they needed to win against the Denver Broncos. We all make the assumption they're going to lose to Philadelphia, and then coming out of the bye, they've got some incredibly important games against the Giants, against the Chargers, games that they really need to win. In my mind, I look at it and say, I would give Kirk Cousins to be ready to go until November 19th. That's week 11 against the Buffalo Bills. So over the course of the next 4 games in 5 weeks, A, Kirk Cousins would learn the system as soon as I get the deal done, and B, I'm just looking to survive. Because I need Kirk Cousins ready and able and on the same page as Nate Hackett in time for that stretch run that begins in Buffalo on November 19th and then continues on that Friday with the Miami Dolphins. And then we're ready to go. So I'm being conservative in terms of how much time he's going to need to understand the playbook before I throw him on the field. That's number 3. Number 4, we're okay with Zach Wilson.
Yes.
To my fellow Jet fans out there, I always want to be honest. So honestly, yeah, Zach has looked better over the last 2 weeks.
And he's also yours. Don't forget.
He's mine.
Yes.
What does that even mean?
You drafted him.
What does that mean?
The Jets drafted him. And if somebody's going to fix him and it's going to feel right, it should be the Jets.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
All right, because this Zach Wilson thing's a little bit more complicated. And this is the hesitation some of my fellow Jet fans are going to have. Is Zach Wilson a long-term quarterback of the New York Jets?
Could be.
Could be?
Yes.
Walk me through how that's even possible.
So he continues to grow as a passer. He gets more confidence in himself. This offense is run heavy. Their defense plays elite level football, and they make the postseason, and anything could happen.
And then what?
And then Aaron Rodgers maybe comes back.
No. Aaron Rodgers comes back.
And he plays for a year.
Aaron Rodgers comes back.
And then he plays for a year. And Zach is the I don't even know how you make him the backup. I don't know what you pay him. Because this is why, just as an aside, I thought it never made sense once you brought Aaron Rodgers here that Zach Wilson fits. Because how does he fit?
He still doesn't fit.
Because he needs a contract after this year, or after next year. So the question always was going to be, how are you keeping Zach here long term if he is your project? Now, with that being said, if he turns into a guy who leads his team to the postseason, of course he's your future.
No, he's not.
Why not?
Because Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback in 2024.
How many years is Aaron Rodgers playing?
Based on
coming off an Achilles at now it'll be 40 a year from now. How many years is Aaron Rodgers going to play?
Aaron Rodgers is going to attempt to play 2 more years. Oh. And I don't think Zach Wilson's going to sit behind him. Like, you brought up something that I agreed with during the offseason, which is I don't see how this works with Zach being the long-term answer. I think it's the same scenario. Even now with him
Unless he plays great.
Plays great to do what? To then trade Aaron Rodgers? Do you think there's any scenario where that's going to happen?
Or, no, there isn't.
So the answer is no. So Zach's not the answer long term.
Well, so, see, here's going to come the conundrum. Let's just assume that Zach plays well for the rest of the season. They make the postseason. And people start to feel okay, meaning internally. Forget what we as fans think. Internally, they feel okay about Zach's future. And Aaron Rodgers comes back, and he's healthy, and he wants to play. Aaron now has the ability to hold the Jets hostage, right? He controls everything right now, Aaron Rodgers, because he can either retire and forgive them having to pay his salary, or he plays hardball and it becomes the exact same situation that he has with the Green Bay Packers a year ago.
There's no hardball. The best case scenario with Zach Wilson is that he's competent. There's no best case scenario where anyone really thinks he's going to be a star and the Jets are going to move on from Aaron Rodgers at the end of the year. That's like rainbows and butterflies. That's not happening. Like, the best case scenario with Zach is really the last 2 weeks. He continues to grow. He doesn't make mistakes. They rely on running the football. They rely on forcing turnovers. And that's a world where Zach Wilson is gone at the end of the year, where Zach Wilson is moved at the end of the year. Zach Wilson is not the long-term answer. Hence, why this idea, and I get that Joe Douglas may be in line with you. That's a problem. I'm giving you my opinion. One of the reasons for not making a deal shouldn't be, quote, they're okay with Zach Wilson. Okay with what? Okay with what? With a guy who, as you even said, is a rookie relearning the system in a year in which he's not going to be the quarterback next year? Well, like, why would the Jets be okay with Zach Wilson? And then the final point you said is, quote, you don't need Kirk Cousins. Yeah, you do. Mm-hmm. What's your goal for this season? Because I can tell you mine.
If I was a Jet front office executive right now, my goal is to make the postseason.
And who gives you a better chance?
I honestly, you can't
hesitate on that.
Well, I don't know what Kirk Cousins is going to look like in the system. I don't know. It could be fine.
Is it really?
Or he could be lost, and it takes him 3 weeks, and those are 3 wins that you need that you could have gotten because Zach was more comfortable.
Do you really think a lost Kirk Cousins in this new system that isn't hieroglyphics is worse than Zach Wilson, who you've admitted is a rookie basically in year 3? How would that be worse?
It's not worse. It's just that Zach feels like we don't know his upside yet. We don't know what his ceiling is. I think we know what Kirk Cousins' ceiling is. I'm not saying it's low.
You think Zach Wilson will ever get to Kirk Cousins' ceiling?
I didn't think Kirk Cousins would get to Kirk Cousins' ceiling. And look where he is. He's been one of the highest paid quarterbacks. He's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks, but he's never won anything. Right? He's never gotten to that next
Has he ever had a defense
level.
as good as this Jet defense?
No, he hasn't.
So then if you take this quarterback, and by the way, I am not minimizing your concerns about understanding and learning the playbook and that adjustment.
Yeah.
That's why I say,
it's less about that. It's more about...
Then what is it about?
Because he's a vet. Like, he'll figure it out.
Okay, so that's not the concern. What's the concern? That Zach Wilson is so freaking good, the Jets have to ride at home this year with him?
No, to me, it feels like if you move on from Zach and... Hold on. All right, so if Zach is here... Forget the Kirk Cousins thing. Zach's here, plays well, gets to the postseason. They have a Zach Wilson, Aaron Rodgers problem. It's like an elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Because if Zach is actually trending towards really good and Aaron Rodgers comes back at 40 off a torn Achilles, like you clearly want Aaron Rodgers, but you don't know what he's going to look like. And you know that Zach Wilson is trending positively. So that becomes a debate. Now you substitute Kirk Cousins, who's actually already a good quarterback, for Zach Wilson, it makes it even worse.
It's not that complicated. It actually makes it less complicated because Kirk Cousins is a Band-Aid.
Yeah, but he's not going to come here and be a Band-Aid.
Of course he is. I'm going to be honest with him. Dude, you are here for the rest of this season because the Vikings are giving up, the Vikings are moving on, and we are in arranged marriage for a few months. You're going to try to win, we're going to try to win, and then during the offseason, dude, enjoy free agency. Go to town on whoever wants to pay you because it's not going to be us because our long-term plan is Aaron Rodgers. Like, I think it's actually kind of simple. The biggest concern is going to be this. The New York Jets are more aligned with you than they are with me. They believe in Zach Wilson. And I apologize. 5 good drives over the last 2 weeks has not convinced me everything we've seen is not true over the last 2.5 years.
I think here's the ultimate problem is you're going to have a locker room issue if they decide to say, Zach, see you later.
Why?
Because I feel like this team has started to build like a little shell around Zach. Like they have his back, so to speak. They actually want to see him be successful. This isn't the Zach Wilson in the Jets club locker room like it was a year ago, where they were just kind of like, all right, whatever. We'd rather have Mike White. Mm-hmm. We have no support for you. You kind of were a jerk, and whatever. Good luck to you, right? Good luck in house to you. This year, it feels like Zach's personality has definitely changed.
I agree with that.
He's so much more, sitting in a meeting with him last weekend, he's so much more aware, right? It's like he gets it. Like the light is on about what he has to do to be the right leader for this team. And this team is starting to galvanize around him. So if you all of a sudden just remove him and replace him with Kirk Cousins, who I'm sure some people like, a lot of people are kind of like, it's Kirk Cousins. And you're going to have a locker room issue.
Do you agree that Garrett Wilson is, if not their best offensive weapon, it's either 1A, 1B with him and Breece Hall?
Yes.
Do you think Garrett Wilson, who wants to catch touchdown passes, who wants to put up gaudy numbers, and he does want to win, you think Garrett Wilson would have an issue with the guy who leads the league in touchdown passes coming into the New York Jets locker room and being the quarterback? You think Garrett Wilson's going to be like, oh, we can't do that to Zach?
In a vacuum, no. But I think he would say, man, that's my guy, right? You're getting rid of one of my teammate, and he's starting to get better. Again, this isn't about success. This isn't about how good Kirk Cousins is versus how good Zach Wilson is. This is about he's our guy. He's our teammate, and he's been through some ups and downs and more downs and ups, but he's starting to climb a little bit in their minds, and I honestly feel like they're around him. And so if you just remove him, it changes the dynamic.
See, I look at Zach Wilson and Kirk Cousins oddly in a similar way. They are Band-Aids until next year. Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback next year. Zach Wilson, will they just put him back as the backup, not pick up his 5th-year option, and let him walk at the end of next year? Maybe. I don't know what the heck they're going to do with Zach Wilson. If he plays reasonably well, you're probably better off trading him for an asset you can get back.
So he has one more year on his contract.
Right, that's what I'm saying. You could put him back as the backup next year and say, hey, he's insurance for Aaron Rodgers, or you could trade him. But either way, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback next year. So I'm simply, as a Jet fan, looking at it this way. What gives me the best chance to win? The Jets are 2-3. Why are they 2-3? What are their biggest issues moving forward? What are they good at? What are they mediocre at? What are my biggest concerns? And here's the reality. The quarterback position is still below average for the New York Jets. It is still the thing that holds them back. So if the Minnesota Vikings, off of this Justin Jefferson injury and putting him on IR for 4 weeks and being patient with his recovery, if they really are going to say, you know what, we're going nowhere, let's tank, and the only way to tank is to get rid of really good players like our starting quarterback, and he becomes available, I want in on an upgrade. I want in on a guy that's going to make my team better. 3 weeks ago, it was like a theory of, hey, if the Vikings struggle, if this happens, if that happens. Well, to me, it's no longer a theory. They're 1-4, and their most dynamic offensive weapon is on IR for the next 4 weeks. The theory's gone. It's happening. And if it's happening, and if he's available, it will annoy me if this general manager doesn't make phone calls. Now, one of the concerns you can bring up, and it's a fair one, is, all right, Evan, what are you giving up? Because am I giving up a first-round pick for Kirk Cousins, which technically they can't trade right now because of the attachments to the Aaron Rodgers trade?
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to give up a first.
I don't think you would need to.
I don't think I would either. Would I offer a 3rd and a 4th? Would I try to dump Carl Lawson, who was a mistake to restructure the deal of? Would I try to dump McCole Hardman, who was a mistake to sign to try to get back draft capital that I send the way of Minnesota? Yeah, because I'm trying to win right now.
Hey, I got to tell you the one caveat and the one thing that might derail all this.
Go ahead.
The New England Patriots might beat you to it. I'm not even joking. I'm not even joking. Because when you look at what New England's what's happening in New England right now, Mac Jones has been benched twice in the last 2 games for Bailey Zappi because they're inept on offense. 3 and outs, interceptions, etc. But their defense, which has given up a ton of points, most of it's not their fault, is actually pretty good. And so if I'm New England and I'm 1-4 and Bill Belichick's 72 years old, I think New England might be trying to make that deal before the Jets. And for the Jets, it's felt good the last 2 weeks for the Jets. Even in a loss to Kansas City, it was weird being around them because they lost the game, but it felt like they won it. They were optimistic, like they felt, I don't know, some positivity for the first time this year.
Yes.
And so that carried into a tough and somewhat ugly but important road win in Denver. And so now it's like they're building. They're just putting some building blocks. Aaron Rodgers was this big cement slab that you could use as your foundation, but that got cracked and it's all over the place. And they're just slowly like putting these building blocks back in place. And Zach's a part of that. And so to strip him out of there, I think would just it would crumble it again. Now, I'm not saying that Kirk can't be like a great, cement glue or whatever, but I don't think I love this, man. I don't love that idea.
I'm not letting 2 weeks and 5 good drives blind me. Because earlier this season when Aaron went down and we all panicked and we all tried to come up with ideas, I even laid out my plan. Sign a veteran backup, give Zach a few weeks. If you have to bench him, and then hope one of these teams, whether it's the Rams or the Vikings, fall out of it and you could trade for a quarterback. I'm still there. I'm in the same damn place. But it seems like most Jet fans have been blinded by a couple of okay weeks from Zach Wilson. I'm not blinded. The Jets are 2-3, and if Kirk Cousins becomes available, he gives this team a chance to win. We'll get your calls coming up, 877-337-6666. Tiki and Brees Hall had a nice conversation on social media. We'll address it. And is Elijah Vera Tucker's injury going to derail another Jet season? We'll address that as well, plus plenty of Giant talk.